Hi, everyone. Welcome to our table talk. We're here with Pastor Jon again.
Hey, everyone.
And we're discussing the second to last sermon in our Ruth series.
Yes.
And so you do some helpful review at the beginning.
Yep.
And that puts it all in perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I think, after chapter 3 and things being a bit spicy and not sure where they were going to land, and then the big wrinkle at the end that there's a closer relative, this is a really helpful transition. And as we're going to talk about, it really begins to undo a lot of bad thinking about God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's held by Christians, those who are skeptical and those who are seeking.
Mm-hmm. 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 Because we begin to see that in the cultural system that we think it, there's the heart of God.
Yeah.
He's caring for the widow.
Right. And so you've got this brilliant moment where Boaz basically undoes the other relative quite well. And you can listen to the sermon of how he does that.
Mm-hmm.
But what really begins to start bleeding through is, Boaz was rich,
mm-hmm.
Boaz was wealthy, Boaz didn't need more land, he had a great reputation in community, he didn't need anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what begins to bleed through is he doesn't just out of duty
mm-hmm.
care for Naomi and
mm-hmm.
Ruth because it's what is right. He loves them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that begins to start showing us something much more. Boaz didn't have to, he was under obligation on one level, but didn't still have to do it. He had to be willing out of love to do it, and he does it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Boaz, of course, is foreshadowing everything for us.
Right. A few times you've used the word worship when you talked about Boaz's obedience.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to see it, that he's responding to God.
Yes.
And loving God.
I think I said in last week's sermon, there was 2 reasons, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, there was 2 reasons I was doing this. He was worshiping God and he liked Ruth. It was a 2-for-1 special. But he took Leviticus 19 seriously, where God said, you don't go over, your fields a second time. You don't harvest around the edges because I'm a generous landlord to you. So you need to be a generous landlord to others. So you need to take care of the poor and the widow because actually that's what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, the way he used his money, the way he farmed, the way he treated people wasn't just he was a nice guy in the community. He understood it's how he honored God.
Right.
He worshiped God.
Right.
And also he was a bit in love.
Right.
In a cultural way that we don't understand today. But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not quite a hallmark.
Not quite a hallmark, and a lot, anyway, yes.
Okay.
A lot less choice.
So there's this moment when the community begins to gather how deep this is.
Yeah.
And they respond with some beautiful blessings.
Yeah, so, this is why sometimes it's worth going through what we'd call the boring parts of the Bible, because
mm-hmm.
in the boring parts is actually where the real good stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
And, the elders pray, first of all, that God would bless Ruth, which means now they view her as part of God's people,
mm-hmm.
which again is shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pray that she and Boaz, she would be like Leah and Rachel, who are, the wives of Jacob, who produced the 12 sons of Israel. Both of them were barren. Both of them couldn't have kids. And they're like, Ruth, you've been barren. We're praying for this. And then they pray that she'd be like Tamar. Now, Tamar's story is brutal and vicious if you read it. But the reason why they pray it is because Tamar basically saves a line from extinction. So they say, you're part of God's people. And not only that, we're praying that you'd have the ability to have children miraculously, and God would bless your child, and He'd change the world, and you'd save the line. That's a lot of good blessings.
Right. And so that gives us the freedom then to extrapolate to Jesus.
Yeah, well, I think the best way to think about this and talk about in your Connect groups is Boaz is the foreshadow of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is the better kinsman redeemer. And it's, I focus a lot on the shoe, right?
mm-hmm.
In that
mm-hmm.
culture, you took your shoe off and put it in the circle to say, I'm in or I'm out. And I just think, it's funny when I hang out with people or even my own kids, and they are, teenagers and they're wrestling with their faith. Are they really Christians? What does it really mean? Are they really faithful? And we approach this differently. Some of us are strivers, so it's like we though we know we're saved because we are loved, we'd keep striving. Other people become apathetic. But no matter where you struggle, the idea that Boaz put a shoe in for Ruth and Naomi, even though he didn't need what they had or who they were, and just said, I'm doing this because I love you. That's the gospel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think what maybe you need to talk about in the groups is there's a weird belief that God was obligated to come here. God was obligated to save us. He's God, so he has to love us. It's not biblical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to do anything. He would have been, in his holiness, absolutely just to walk away and just destroy us.
Right.
100%. There's this weird, especially in Western culture, because we have Christian roots and we don't even know about it, that grace and mercy are like expected. He didn't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He did it because he loves us.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of him putting the shoe in, and you can't remove the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who put the shoe in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is it, the author of Hebrews says? Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. The author of and perfecter of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have such comfort that when I'm struggling, or when my kids are struggling, or I haven't been holy the way I'm supposed to be, or life is tough, or it's boring, it's my shoe doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
His shoe matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Christianity is rooted in calling. You'll never know you're a child of God and loved until you understand you're called.
Mm-hmm.
Most people like being called a child of God or loved, but they miss it starts with the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
The shoe has to be in.
Mm-hmm. 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 And so our Connect groups become a great place to remind each other about that.
I think so. And even pray that we would know it's true.
Right.
It's true.
Right.
I think so. And I also just think, a good, I say beautiful, dangerous prayer also in Connect groups would be, would you show me where I've presumed your grace? Mm-hmm. Like, if you're used to mercy, mm-hmm. you never can imagine a moment when there isn't mercy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But imagine tomorrow if you woke up and God said, and he won't, but imagine he just said, I'm never forgiving you again. Mm-hmm. 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 How, terrifying. But there's when you understand he wasn't obligated, but he chose, it just changes the whole thing. And again, for people who are watching, even in Connect groups who haven't crossed the line of faith yet, this is the distinguishing factor. I actually saw a young adult go on AI this week and said to AI, if you knew all religious knowledge and all philosophy, what would you choose? And AI immediately said back, I'd become a Christian. And he said, why? He said, because Christianity is the only one based on love and the only one that comes for us when we could not get to him. Exactly.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Blessings from AI.
Well, some.
Yeah.
That's a different sermon series.
Right. Well, you're in your groups, and we trust that you'll have so many good conversations. And remember, the promises are coming up, which will help build on this.
Yes, in the
as
summer.
we live for God's glory.
That's good.
Have a great week.